One thing, that's the music. That means Tony Messenger, who was a little bleary-eyed yesterday, joining us. He joins us for his normal Thursday segment. Post-Dispatch columnist, contributor to the Big 550 KTS. Good morning, Tony Messenger.
Good morning, McGraw. You know, you often have me somewhere in an undisclosed bunker. I'm wondering if I'm actually going to have to get one.
Why? You've been reading your emails again?
Yeah, reading your emails the day after Donald Trump gets elected, when you've been writing columns about how un-American it would be to elect Donald Trump, is not an experience in positive reinforcement. I needed a Stuart Smalley moment yesterday, where I stared at my mirror and said, "You're good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you." Well, yesterday, gosh darn it, people didn't like me very much, but that's the way it goes. That's the journalism / democracy business.
Well, you get paid to give your opinion. I get paid to give my opinion. Newspapers have opinion pages, but you have to wonder where the Republican Party is, because you have the traditional conservative Republican, country club Republican. You have the sort of right-wing side of that party, and now you have the populist wing of the party. And I don't know, now that they own everything, are we going to see what we see down in Jefferson City, that they own everything and they have a harder time governing when they own everything?
Well, you're definitely going to see that, but on top of that, you have a president now who isn't actually one of them. I mean, we don't really know what Donald Trump is. And even some of the people who voted for him accept that. I know people who voted for Donald Trump who, when I would suggest to them, "I know you're a good person, how can you accept all these things that he says and does?" And they would say, "Oh, that's just reality TV. That's just campaigning. He won't really be like that." So there are some Trump voters who expect him to actually govern as a centrist, sane person. And there are some Trump voters, the more angry ones, who actually expect him to build the wall, to kick the Muslims out, to
arrest Hillary,
do the things that he said he was going to do, put Hillary in jail.
Right.
And it's that crowd that's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of years as the president doesn't do those things.
It's also interesting where I'm most curious as to the deficit hawks in the party that couldn't agree on a set of cuts, so they put in the sequester cuts. These are the same people who are talking about a massive stimulus package, a massive tax cut package, and a massive barrier to trade deals. So I want to know where the deficit hawks are, and do we not care about deficits now that Donald Trump is in office?
Well, we sure didn't care about them during this election cycle. Here's what I think is quite likely to happen in a lot of cases. Your mainstream Republicans in the Senate in particular, they actually aren't in reality that far from many of the positions that President Barack Obama took. But they opposed them because they made a vow, President Barack Obama took those positions and we're going to oppose them. So I think a lot of what you're going to see, a lot of Republicans in Congress really want a stimulus package that pays for some roads and some investment in this country right now. We need that in Missouri. We need that in the country. We have let things go. And Donald Trump actually did talk about that. That was one of the things that Donald Trump talked about, is an infrastructure package. So now you're going to have the Republican Congress and the Republican president trying to come up with a way to invest in America if they do so, which is going to be a lot of the same stuff that Democrats were trying to talk about over the last 4 to 8 years. I think you're going to see, to some degree, more of the same some of the time. They're going to put new names on it. They're going to say, well, we're we're getting rid of Obamacare, but really what they're going to do is make the fixes that everybody talked about, because I don't think you can get rid of it at this point. And that's what's going to be fascinating to watch, is the give and take between, Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and all of those members of the Senate who came out very publicly against Trump, and all of those members of the House who have been on the far right, who want the worst of what Donald Trump talked about during the campaign. They're not going to agree on everything, and what's going to be interesting is they can't blame Obama anymore. They can't blame libtards anymore. It's all on them, and they're going to have to govern, and this is going to be, I hope fascinating is the right word. I hope it's not just horrible in terms of the worst things that Donald Trump talked about actually becoming public policy, actually mainstreaming racism and those things. I think when we actually talk about the policy, it's going to be a little bit of a train wreck within that party, and it's going to be interesting to see how the voters who elected Donald Trump react to that.
Paul Ryan's signature issue is he wants to transform entitlements. Many of them do on Capitol Hill. Donald Trump has said 1 million times, I'm not going to touch Social Security. I'm not going to touch Medicaid. So, there's going to be an interesting rub. In a lot of ways, he's, as you say, talking of the Democratic agenda in the Republican Party, and so you are going to pit all different factions of this party together. I think you bring up an interesting point. Tony Messenger, any other comments about the state, Greitens and Hawley and Blunt, and any comments or thoughts a day later after the election here in the state?
Two interesting thoughts for me to watch in Missouri. Greitens, similar to Trump, is somebody who, if you look at what a lot of Republicans said during the campaign and you look at his history, isn't actually a traditional Republican conservative. And so how will he govern? Will he govern as the guy who wants to blow things up? Will he be able to work with lawmakers? He's never been through that process before. The Capitol is an interesting place, and when push comes to shove, even when Republicans are on the same team, when they're wanting their ideas and somebody wants to leverage something else, the battles become very interesting and very personal intra-party. So it will be very interesting to see those relationships. And then the one other thing that I will find fascinating, we elected an attorney general based on the concept that he's going to fight the federal government, that he's going to go to the Supreme Court and he's going to stop regulation and stop overreach. That's the guy that we elected. Well, now the federal government is his party. It's entirely his party. So is Josh Hawley going to fight Donald Trump? Is Josh Hawley going to fight Paul Ryan?
Well, that was a campaign slogan. I mean, that was just political rhetoric to sort of differentiate himself, and that was the
right. But that's what this stuff is about. This is what's going to be interesting. Voters voted based on political rhetoric, and now they have here in Missouri and nationally an entirely Republican government, particularly in Missouri, because in Missouri they've got a veto-proof power. In Congress, you're still going to need some Democrat votes for some things, but in Missouri they don't need a Democrat vote for anything.
Be interesting to watch.
And so, will they fund the schools? Will they fund the roads? Will they do the things that that traditionally make a state go? And if they don't, if Missouri's GDP doesn't grow, if the tax revenue here does what it's done in Kansas under entirely Republican control, will the voters accept that?
Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist, Tuesdays and Thursdays here on the Big 550 KHRS. Tony.